All right, folks. Welcoming back, everyone. We are here. We have reached the final session of today's festival, and our next speaker is Anil Prasad. I would want to give a quick introduction about him, but before that, I wanted to know, Anil. Thank you so much for showing up. Allow. Yes, sir. Absolutely. I've given. Let me just give you the co-host access as well. One second, sir. Oh, there are two. There are two. Anil, I'm seeing right now. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Awesome. All right, a quick introduction about Anil. Anil has spent over 2 decades of experience building and running production data and AI systems with a strong focus on one of the most critical challenges in AI today, understanding and proving what an AI system actually does once it is deployed in the real world. Now, his work focuses on AI evaluation, governance, provenance, and production readiness, helping product and engineering leaders build systems with reliable metrics, trusted evaluation frameworks, and the evidence required to operate AI responsibly at scale. He is also the creator of Provener, an open source toolkit focused on recording, verifying, and signing evidence from AI and machine learning workflows. Anil, it's once again a pleasure to have you here with us today. Welcoming you over here. Good to go. Anil, over to you now.
Hey, thank you, Vishal. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes, I can hear you okay. And your video is also proper. Good to go. Thank you so much. I can see the screen as well.
Yeah, one of the thing I want to clarify, Vishal, is I think my time is invested in how to use AI safely in the regulated environment, right? So it's very important, um, like how AI is used in the regulated industry versus startup, right? So product and all that. So yeah, um, yeah, we'll quickly go through the presentation, and the topic I want to choose is to have a conversation with all of you about how to monetize products using AI. I think at this point we all know that it's not the question about the model, right? It's about the end-to-end product, and if we can explain how agents are used to leverage and the outcome it does, I mean that's where I think the price point is now, right? So I want to pick this topic about monetizing AI. So let's jump into the next slide here. When I was researching about how I put this across, is I thought we have to back up with a solid data and fact. So I didn't want to make up something, right? So what I did is, like, when I was researching, I found that McKinsey had conducted a research for about 2,000 companies across 100 different countries, and this research and report was in July 2025, and approximately that time frame. And what they reported, it's all been public. You can Google it. You'll find it yourself. The interesting facts that McKinsey reported was 88% report that regular AI use across all business functions. And I mean, I'm sure at this point, all of you are using AI for Teams or for Word documents, presentations, and whatever, right? And then also maybe the cloud code within your IDE environment, and product management users for quick MVP and prototyping, right? So we all know we're using AI across every different touch points. I mean, that's not a question, right? So what McKinsey reported is, out of this, they interestingly say that the 61% cannot point to a single point of profit from using AI across a deployed solution. So that's what they reported out. 39% of the companies say that they're able to attribute directly their bottom line or EBIT into how AI is using them to achieve that. But 61% just cannot point to how they're realizing the ROI. So that's an interesting fact. So that means we have a lot of work to do or opportunities to do. So that's an interesting, that McKinsey reported. The other part I want to, clarify on this slide is everyone in that 88% have a working model. It is the monetization gap that is not they're not able to prove it. So that's one thing that McKinsey reported. And one of the other thing I want to call out here is that if someone raises that 95% of AI pilots fail, MIT actually finds that I think they conducted another interview with 52 executives across US, and then they clarify that it is basically the product itself and how are they able to make more money or more customers because of using AI. So that is something they are unable to prove. So that's one more fact for us to think about. Then I go a little fast. They have about 18 slides, Vishal. So third slide. This slide talks about an interesting fact that Gartner reported. Gartner is a leading research firm, and they had three different causes they called out why the projects fail, especially the projects that use AI and agents. This was a research that Gartner published in June of 2025, and they report that 40% of agentic AI projects will be canceled by end of 2027. So we are still in the mid of, I would say, later part of 2026. But they project that from now until end of 2027, many of these agentic AI projects would fail, would be canceled by end of next year. So that's about 40% is what they project. I mean, just a projection, right? Interestingly, they're saying three things that may cause this AI projects to cancel. One is about the escalating cost. We know that inferencing is not cheap. The input output tokens are expensive, and we keep prompting the same prompt and we get the different outcomes, but that will not stop, right? So product will actually have the same intent and engineer will have the same intent. So escalating cost is the number one, according to Gartner. Number two cost would be the business value, so business outcome. So that is unclear. It's not cleared out how agents would solve the business outcome or business value, how they would create. The teams can describe what they do, but nobody can state what it is really worth, right? How does an agentic AI result in a business outcome? That question is not answered yet. The third cause, interestingly, is about the inadequate risk controls. How does AI or agentic AI work in the public domain or the private domain? So that's more about guardrails and risk controls, right? There's no risk model yet, which is comprehensive and that could be managed. So imagine in a world where we use agents across the product, and there are risks that come along. One could be a data exposure, one could be a customer data being hacked, or I mean, whatever that could be, right? So there is no model to manage that risk. This is something the companies are used to, but with agentic AI and agentic integration, that risk model or risk management is still not matured. So that's the third reason that why they think these agentic projects might fail. And then interestingly, they also say that model quality is not. So what I found is in this report, there are two things that was interesting to me. One is they clearly say that model quality is not the problem. Data quality is not the problem. So those two I thought would be the top. But if you see the three reasons they said, model is not in the list, data is not in the list. We all think that's the problem. So that's absolutely not the problem, right? So I mean that's one thing Gartner interestingly reported. Um, okay, let's go. So this is we'll get into the segue of a product perspective, right? What are we selling? What are the question that everyone needs to answer is when I bring in AI or agentic AI, what is that I'm trying to sell to the customer, right? Am I enhancing their current experience, or what does that mean from a price standpoint? Will they pay more for using AI? I mean, those are the questions that we'll get into in the next section here. This slide talks about the market movement, right? So if you read the bar charts, the 21% in 2024, to like 15% in 2025, that's basically they're attributing to the model itself. And then the subscription, the flat subscription has been from 29 to 22%. The light blue versus the dark blue is the shift that is happening where the market is moved. From 21 to 15%, it's reduced in 2025. The subscription to these AI models has interestingly reduced from 29% to 22%. And then the third tier is about hybrid, which means I have a base free plus and I have a usage for AI. So that increased from 27% to 41%. So there's a 14-point jump in about 1 year. So that is that talks about the adoption of AI and people subscribing to Claude Code or Gemini or ChatGPT. Um, the source for this data is Kyle Poller. Kyle Poller, it's a state of B2B monetization, and the research was based on 240 plus software and AI, product companies. And then the right-hand panel, you see that the outcome-based pricing is the primary model at only 5% of companies. So 5% companies really attribute an outcome-based pricing for using this primary model, and 25% expect that they would be at a point where they can explain or justify the pricing, um, for the usage of AI and their product by 2028. So there's more work to do in next 2 years, and the market would shift, and how these costs would be justified against the usage of AI. Um, and let's go to the next slide here. This is about what does the market actually charge, right? I mean, it's a very important question to answer. Is it more about slowing down, or this is a very important question that we all need to think about. What would the market actually charge, right? And so I'll just play out one question here. Uh, two vendors, Imagine two vendors would sell an identical outcome. For example, right, the Cloud Code, Codex, and Cursor, right? They all pretty much do the same outcome, right? Producing code. Um, and imagine there's one bill um, that we get when everything works. The other bill is every time it is trying to do something, right? So it is not the pricing difference; it's the final product that matters to the companies. And as these models get more competitive, the the question is about, if I have identical outcome, then the question is, if it boils down to how much the bill is for every month, right? I mean, that's one thing that we'll answer in the coming months. The other part here, interesting facts in this slide, is about the 99 cents per resolution. That's kind of an nothing changed, and 50 cents per resolved conversation by HubSpot. HubSpot reported that Zendesk says roughly about 1.2 to $2 for each verified resolution. So that means that I'm addressing a problem with the customer. I'm able to verify the resolution and close it with the customer, right? So that whole end-to-end is what Zendesk reported the cost. The Salesforce agent, which is kind of making a lot of impact now, is they attribute about $2 per conversation. Whether it's resolved or not doesn't matter. So you see that just for $2, just for having a conversation with the customer, right? And then Deca, Deca, Decagon is about roughly $50,000 for a platform fee, and then about 50 cents per resolution. Sierra is about same thing, about 150K revenue, and then they have some bespoke outcomes, right? So this is where the primary question about what the market is actually charging, right, and how it results to each of these companies. So this is kind of an important thing for us to understand. Um, and yeah, so let's go to the next slide. Now, I want to touch on the one of the important thing about the framework, understanding the framework for having a billable framework, right? Billable testing framework. Now, four questions that needs to be answered: that you do not have a price yet, but you do hope to have a price once you bring in or integrate AI to your product, right? Now, the first question is, can the customer see it? The second question is, can you measure it without argument? Which means that, can you write down the definition? Can you handle the customer's procurement team? If they dispute it, can you spend every renewal defending the invoice instead of selling them, right? So that's where you can measure without argument. The third aspect is, does it scale? Does the product scale with the value that it's creating, or does it scale based on the cost, right? Which means I'm adding more features, so therefore the cost keeps going up. Or is it about adding more features, the value of the product is increasing, right? So that's another thing to think about in the framework of how you bill, like how you bill a customer, right? The fourth aspect of the billable framework is, can you defend the the bill for the future, right? For, let's say, a customer signed a deal with you, and you have a price point with them, and they have signed up for monthly subscription or 1 year subscription, right? Now, they are in 3 months down the line when you have features rolling out for the product and customers are using it. The other question is, can you defend the subscription cost that would result in the next 9 months, right? Because they're already in 3 months. So this is where a reconstruction or any charge on demand needs to be adjusted, whether because of features you are increasing the price or is it going to stay static, and what model versions are you deploying, what is the evidence that you're producing that a certain feature gives an output that the customer is looking for, right? And if you're not able to prove any of that, there is no revenue, right? And you have account receivables waiting to become a dispute. So that's a very important thing, thinking about building a product where how would I develop a framework for my pricing of the product, right? Subscription cost, or how do I bill the customer when they have signed up, and how do I manage what I charge to the customer versus the features that I'm deploying, consistently, right, to the product. So that is something I will live a thought. It's more about thinking, from a startup standpoint, from the companies that are surviving because of the subscription cost, and how do they produce value versus how to develop a framework. So this is a very important aspect that any product leader should have already thought about or should think about. And yeah, let's move on to an example for a resolution problem. I wanted to basically not explain with a scenario, right? Um, and this one is about, let's say, a vendor reports 76% average resolution across 8,000 customers. And this typically is in their sales deck. There are independent reports that have the same metrics between 42 to 50%. On a per resolution price, it's about 40% difference in what the buyer pays versus the real outcome. So the gap is not about dishonesty, it's about the resolution was never defined in a way both sides should verify. So that framework I just mentioned previously, right? It's have we defined that resolution gap with the customer, right? So that is one important thing that I want to call out. And then also the vendor would measure the conversations that did not escalate. The buyer measures the problem that actually went away, and it's not the same event, but nobody thought about it, right? The Zendesk answers this question where they say that the bill is only for a verified resolution, and once confirmed, a particular issue has been resolved by the customer, and there is a separate LLM evaluation model within like 72 hours, for example, right? And everything else would be free. So that is where Zendesk is pointing to usage of an LLM to solve a customer resolution problem, versus they're saying everything else apart from resolution is kind of free to the customer, right? So that's one example I just want to call out. They did not lower the price, but what they did is they brought the argument off the table by adding an auditing flow to the whole thing, right? So one key thing here is the thesis that we all need to work out is a product team should make an evidence-based decision and right into the revenue line. So that is where you would attach the evidence part of it into the revenue part of it. So those two have to be mapped together, right? And the provenance is not about the compliance topic, it's about the pricing feature. So that's an important distinction the product teams have to think about. And then let's go to the next slide. Okay. So now we'll interestingly get into a section where whether you can prove that you have a unit, or can you evidence it well through the invoice, right? So this is the section that we'll go through where we'll talk about 6 dimensions that we should all measure. And then the question about the metric audit. We'll talk about a sample incident, right? So yeah, let's go into this section more. Okay. There are about 6 dimensions that is worth measuring from a product perspective. We need to measure groundness, accuracy, reliability, variance, inference cost, and safety. These 5 things, I think everybody's doing. I'm doing it on my day-to-day. I think I'm assuming that most of the products do measure those six metrics: groundness, accuracy, reliability, variance, inference, cost, and safety. The other part, the benchmark scores are very important. The variance in the highlighted, you can see that the average accuracy is about 94%. I think it's good. It's about 90%, which is good for us. Somewhere there is a segment that is getting about 60%, and that segment is the call with your C-level executives, right? And an average device is for for hiding your worst customer, right? For example, the inference cost is the second one. What this means is, what does one billable unit cost at 100 times current volume, right? If you don't know that, you have you have not made a pricing decision. You have made a guess, right? So it's important to understand the inference cost as the second pillar. These two are the ones that never basically reach to any dashboard, and these two decide whether a revenue is worth having, right? So those are the dimensions that is worth measuring, and I'm sure every AI product has that in their roadmap. Um, Now this slide, primarily there's one question that it should answer about the metric audit. It basically addresses what would the score on this metric still be completely useless, right? So whether any work can be done on any metric or any domain. Um, and one example here is that imagine a text to SQL benchmark. You're having these customer queries or different text that you get, and then you want to converting that to a SQL within database to retrieve. Over 90% of these queries that are generated using AI execute well. 70% return the correct answer. So this is very, and I have this in my own experience too, right? When I'm able to get all the business problem in terms of text, the PRDs and business requirements, right? I take all that and I'm trying to store data in my database. I'm trying to write a SQL query, right? So when I use AI to produce that SQL query, only about 70% of the time I'm getting the right answer. 30% I'm not getting it. So it's either hallucination or the data is correct, right? So most of the time, what I have seen consistently is these models hallucinate until you put a guardrail, like, if you don't. One thing I've realized is when we design and develop agents, we are not asking it to iterate if the answer is not as expected, right? I mean, as the correct answer. So that benchmark, we don't feed it to the model. We simply take what the model gives. So what I have seen as a design pattern is we should tell the model or the agent to go back and iterate if the expected output is not close to what it should be, right? What it should be correct. So that's one thing I've seen personally to the experience that I've seen. The other part is about when the query runs, I've seen that the numbers are wrong. It's not about the errors, it's nothing about alerts, and a business decision gets made on it, right? So that's one thing we need to think about when we report something, the business acts on it. So we have to make sure all the metrics and explainability is given to an answer from the AI. And then again, if I go through the other aspects here is the time to reconstruct, and if a customer disputes a charge, let's say a bank or a credit card company, right? How long does it take for you to show exactly how it was produced, right? Are you able to use AI to answer that question quickly when a dispute comes from a customer, right? This is another metric audit that is important for these AIs to solve. Yeah, and then let's go to the next slide. Um, and this one is about an incident I want to highlight is this is the emotion center or the bridge from metrics to money, right? This is where the actual incident matters, right? Healthcare revenue cycle. An agent, imagine agent silently approved like $2 to $3 million in a non-covered procedure over roughly 6 weeks, and then the CFO found it in a month-end review. The audit pipeline never found it, but the CFO found it. The uptime, latency, throughput, error rates, all of them are green. The monitoring and evidence are different things, right? So monitoring says the system is up, but then the evidence should say what was decided and why. Almost every team has confused between what they monitor and the evidence they're able to produce. So that's a key thing that I want to highlight. If you cannot evidence what the system did from the agents, you cannot invoice it, right? So that's kind of the formula that I'm also using. And the same missing capability that is the 2.4 million walkout is the capability that you need to build to the outcomes. So one problem is filed under two different budgets. So that's one thing that we need to also think about. This is published as anonymized in to the site and then published as a case study. So nobody thinks that you're disclosing something you should not, right? So that's one thing I want to call out. Um, the next section we'll go quickly is the margin and packaging. So this is about the margin and where AI actually sits in the price book, right? When you have a pricing model or a business model or a pricing book, how does AI actually sit in your overall pricing framework or pricing book? So that is what we'll get into the next section. Very important for product teams, especially, right? Um, Now, this section will talk about is the marginal truth, the four public repricing lessons that which I want to share, the packaging decision as a product when you package with AI. So what does that look like? So we'll go through that, right? So we'll hit on the marginal truth. So the median software gross margin is about 80%, and it held about 79 to 81% for 4 years. And at the median, the AI infrastructure has not compressed the software at all. So that is the AI infrastructure continues to be the dominating factor. And from a software perspective, AI is collapsing the software margin, right? So the bottom line for software, AI is collapsing that because of the capital and unknown expenses that you have. Aleph and Benchmark published on June 2026 that 300 plus B2B SaaS and AI native companies, this data is based on those actuals, right? The other part is the source checking footnote is the AI margin here is 50 to 60%, which is like the figure everyone quotes from 2020. It gets recycled as a current analysis like 6 years later. So check on the date on any statistics that confirms what we already believe, right? So margin is now the consequence of pricing model that we choose and not the domain or sector we are in, right? So that is the decision that in most companies it's being made by default of whoever wrote the pricing page, right? So getting the marginal truth is important based on these sample statistics that I called out. And then let's get into the four public um, repricing lessons that I want to share. And here, Anthropic disclosed the Anthropic Cloud product, right? Anthropic disclosed that the individual users on the original $2,200 per month plan cost the company tens of thousands per month. The flat pricing on these unbounded meter is an unhedged short position, right? The cursor on 2025, they moved from fixed fast request to API rate usage, and they actually it was not received well by all of us, and there was a public criticism when they did that. Like cursor, like what I mean is the cursor when they moved from a fixed fast request to API based usage, right? So that's what not received well, and they came to and they apologized later why they did, why they did that. The pricing was defensible, the margin was not communicated well to the customers. So those fail differently, and only one is the pricing problem. GitHub Copilot, the agentic users reported bills 10 to 50 times higher under the token credits. Nothing malfunctioned. Nobody had modeled the new usage shape. So that was something that people didn't expect from a GitHub Copilot. Salesforce, three agent force pricing models inside 18 months. So three in the software companies that changed the pricing over the past year. Nobody has this solved. That is an issue and not an excuse, right? So Anthropic, Cursor, GitHub, and Salesforce, three of them, reported their pricing and what it results to them, right? So those are the public repricing lessons that came out from these four companies. So that's a good one for us to understand. Um, Now let's move on to the decision for packaging. So we have three options that we can consider. One is that should we bundle into the base price, or should we surcharge or have an add-on price, or should we give it this as a separate offering, right? If you think about Palo Alto, they decided to bundle everything, right? So they came up with this platform concept, and everything is part of a platform. And of course, you would have a price adjustment when you're signing up for a product like holistic subscription, right? So you basically get all the features, including whatever they're building, right? So bundle into the base price means that when AI raises the value for what you already sell and the cost per user is small and predictable, the base price do not itemize, right? The risk, therefore, is that you absorb the cost and never learn from what customers would have paid. The surcharge on as an add-on cost model is where the usage varies widely between the minority drives and most of the cost. That basically protects your margin, and the rate becomes more willingness to pay experiment. A separate offering is where the AI does a different job for a different buyer and a different budget line. The only path is to have a new revenue line rather than a defensive one, right? So we need to have its own go-to-market, and the teams need to underestimate that any order of magnitude. So that's the separate offering packaging decision that we have to think about. The other important stat is 75% or 70% of buyers say that AI spend comes out of their existing technology budget. So you're not selling into a new cost. You're basically taking someone else's line item, which they already have, which means your real competition is probably at the renewal or not about another vendor, right? So what this means is that if I have a line item for the cost for my technology budget, and 70% buyers say that AI cost should come out from that budget, right? So that's a very big problem enterprises are facing. How do they solve it? Because they've not planned it, right? They don't know if when you hand over the AI subscription to the users, they don't know the cost because it all depends on the inferencing, right? So you cannot budget it, right? I mean, you can set up the when the limit for each developers or each users, but beyond that, you are not able to estimate the budget or the cost. So that's one problem is part of the packaging decision. Um, and then the other part is I laid out some kind of a 90-day plan, which I'll summarize. So week one is about imagine we want to write a plan. So week one would be naming the unit. We kind of write it down saying we charge for one feature. We run it through 4 different questions. So most teams discover they are charging for the effort versus calling it a value. Week 2 to 4 would be the instrumentation of the cost that's fully loaded and cost per unit today, and then the model is about 100x. If the answer is unknown, that means the finding and the outlines the roadmap. Month two is about publish the definition, which means I'm writing as if a procurement will read it, because eventually they will have to read it. And month three is about pricing experiment, which means one segment, one model, a stated hypothesis, and it's not a repricing, right? So it's an experiment that I'm willing to lose. So that's another month three plan, right? And none of these require budget or vendor permission. So it's about how we think about to go through that 90-day plan from week one through month three, right? So that's one perspective that I wanted to share with the product leaders here. Um, Now I think I'm almost coming to the end, but I'll take questions after this. But key takeaways, I think I want to walk out from this is five key takeaways. Um, and then the one is about the gap between 88% of adoption of AI and who are saying 6% have real return. And that's a huge monetization gap. You have over 80% who have adopted AI. Only 6% of from that 80% adoption are reporting real monetization, gap, right? So it'll not be closed by a better model, right? So it's about the product itself, it's about the customers, it's about the teams that are using the AI, and how you also treat AI as your co-partner, right? And that's one thing, one takeaway from this presentation, right? The second takeaway is about charging for something the customer can see, measure, and dispute in your favor. Tokens are or your problems and not their problem, right? So I think as a product leader, we have to own the tokens and we have to own the problem, right? We cannot um, we cannot delegate that to the customer, right? So that's one thing. That's another takeaway that I want to work out as a product leader, right? The third takeaway as a product leader would be to write the unit definition if procurement will read it, which means if it's arguable, you'll spend renewals defending invoice. So that's another takeaway, that how do I work with the procurements? If I have a product to for the enterprises to use, how do I write and work with the procurement? That's another important thing, that takeaway I want to walk out with this presentation, right? The fourth key takeaway is about the margins, the profit margins. It's not the consequence of a pricing model that you choose. It's about software margins that did not basically collapse, right? And then the usage based are about 18 points lower, right? So that's margin is important, and how I'm able to defend the software margin versus the model, right? The model that the software is using, right? So because when I say software margin, what I mean is the hosting cost for the software, the backend, front end, and the database. Those are the software margins, that are the costs that I incur. Now you have this tokens and AI model problem, right? So you're trying to bring AI into the software, and how do you define that margin? So that's what is the fourth thing that I want to walk out as a key takeaway. The fifth one is very important, is that is key thing is, imagine when I have a product, I cannot monetize if I cannot prove it, right? If I cannot prove it. If I'm not able to reconstruct, then I'm not able to have any revenue, right? So that's a very key important thing that I want to walk out, is you cannot monetize what you cannot prove, right? So that's the five key takeaways from this presentation, and I'm hoping you guys found it useful, right? Yeah, I would love to take some questions here, and even learn from some of these questions, Vishal. So I'll open it up to the public.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anil. Very fantastic insights. Audiences, please go ahead, raise your hand. You can ask your question. I think this is the time. Very fantastic, insightful session, Anil. Really. Please raise your hand in case if you have any questions. Let me just quickly check on LinkedIn also, because we are streaming it live on LinkedIn.
Yeah. The other thing,
If you
Vishal,
have.
is this aspect that I covered today is maybe new to some of the product teams, and it might be evolving. But I just want to share my thoughts about it, right? So how do I think about to explaining that when I'm adopting AI,
Mm,
how can I explain the monetization gap, right? So am I realizing the ROI? So that's one important thing, right? It's all evolving, Vishal, right? It's something new for everyone, each of us, right? Everybody has different story and how they do it. And the second aspect is something where the customer is actually seeing the value. They're able to measure. For example, give you an example. You're using a software to create an invoice, right? You do it today through different steps. But using AI, can the customer see the difference in creating an invoice? Let's say if I have a company and I have about 50 different invoices to produce every day, right? Now I have one full-time person working on it to generate invoice for each customer for the job. Now imagine if I can automate that process of invoice creation using AI. Of course, you need to have data, right? You need to have your technician put all the data of what work they did, what parts they used, what is the time they spent in a customer's house or whatever repairing, right? So can customers see that value, right? So if they see the value, they will pay for that value, right? I mean, that's the key. The second thing that is important, right? And third thing again is about um, if I have developed a software with AI, and if it has certain value and solves a certain problem, how can I work with the procurement to explain my software cost versus the AI or the model cost, right? So how do I bring that together, explain them, and also how do I go through those tough conversations with procurement and compliance? Because procurement will bring compliance teams, right, legal teams. So how do I
mm.
articulate that whatever data is shared is private to that customer, right? So those are the important things that we have to think about. And the fourth one is about the consequence of, like today I'm making X amount of profit, and now because of AI and introducing the integration of models into my software workflow, I'm incurring cost as a business owner, right? So how do I define my pricing model, right? So that's another
True.
problem that I have to solve as a product leader, right? And again, I have software margins which I'm getting currently, and now
True.
because of the models, AI models, my margins would actually collapse, right? So how do I justify that, and how do I define that? And that framework is important, right? And the last thing, right, is about I cannot monetize anything unless I'm able to prove something, right? Remember the example I talked about invoice? If I can prove that the invoice, 50 invoices can be produced in 5 minutes versus the entire day, I have proved something, right? So that's the fifth thing, very important thing, So hopefully that sits well with all of you.
Oh, yes, indeed, 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 Anil. Anil, we have question. I do not know who is this. It's an anonymous question. So he's
Yeah,
asking that, for CAD-based engineering, how do
yeah.
you see AI evolving from simply generating models to actually understanding engineering intent, design constraints, and manufacturing requirement?
Oh, okay. So that is we're talking about bringing AI in the early cycle, right? Before even producing a software or producing a product, right? So this is, I would say, more. I would think it's more about market research. It is more about before putting AI into work. I want to do my research about the customer problems. I want to do my research about the pricing, the whether it will result in a price increase or right reduction, right? I'll also talk about the customer profile, like will it bring in more customers, will it address more problem for Gen Z's, right? Because one of the thing I'm seeing is importantly is before you use AI or models to your software, there is research that Gen Z is actually bringing, right? So when you talk about Gen Z's, their behavior patterns are entirely different. So I would attribute this to the research that you do before using AI to solve any problem, right? So I think for me, number one would be the customer problems, right? Understanding the customer profile, demographics, and their problems before using AI.
We have Nandini who has been raising hand. Yeah, Nandini, go ahead.
Hey, hi Anil. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can
Yes,
hear
we
you.
can. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I have a product. So it's an AI product. So it's new to the market. So how will I make the customer to use it first? What should be what my approach should be
Yeah,
to
Nandini,
try?
that's a yeah. I've solved that problem actually. So have you heard of this A/B testing?
Yes.
Okay, I think I would employ the that A/B testing technique, Nandini. What I would do is I would pick my uh, experimental or candidate pool. I would roll out the features for those 5 to 10 users. I would actually measure and log their metrics, how much new features they're using, how much AI is being used, how much of my cost I'm incurring for inferencing. So I would employ the A/B testing, Nandini, to pick those 5 to 10 candidate customers, and I would collect enough data before I increase that. And the way I would approach that, Nandini, is once I have the data from those 5 to 10 candidate sample customers, I would sit with my product team and engineering team. I would share the North Star metrics that, hey, these customers are spending more time using AI. These customers are
Mhm.
spending more time with not using AI, but existing software, right? Now you as a leader, you have insights into customers, how many are really using AI, and therefore how do you price it, and how many are not using AI but they're just using your product, and what is their problem that they're facing, right? So those are the how I would tackle it. But the other third aspect, Nandini, would be operationally how you position your team, right, for debugging issues and risk customer
Mhm.
resolutions. That's another aspect, completely different. But direct answer to your question is I would employ A/B testing.
Okay. So what is it for a B2B product?
Oh, B2B product is much more easier because I have the
Mm.
leverage to not directly work with the consumer, but with the business. So I would delegate my exercise or effort to that business partner of mine, right? I think it makes it much more easier for me if I have a B2B customer versus I have to deal with direct consumers, right? So I would for B2B also, I would think that if you have a multi-tenant situation, right? I mean, I'm assuming you have a multi-tenant, right? Like different customers, multi-tenant platform. So I would roll out this feature for specific tenants or customer, and I would work with them to use that particular, right? If you don't have a multi-tenant model, it becomes an issue, right? But I'm assuming that you have a multi-tenant model, which means each customer is segregated. They have their own space to operate, so you can work with a specific B2B customer.
Okay,
I,
Anil.
yeah, I mean it's a it's an architectural thinking also, right? How your product is designed, whether it's multi-tenant product or single product with all customers. So that's where B2C and B2B. I think you said B2B, so I think it's multi-tenant. So it's easier for you to solve.
Yes. Thank you, Anil. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Nandini. In the interest of time, we'll take one last question, Anil. Okay, and again, the same person maybe he has asked this question in the Q&A box. Which AI skills do you think will become valuable for mechanical or product engineers, not necessarily AI engineers, but people working directly in engineering?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, that's very important. I'll give an example. It's a very good question. I think whoever is asked, Vishal. I'll explain a real scenario, right? Imagine that you are working in. I don't know how many of you know the power generation versus power distribution. Like in a typical, like if I'm actually supplying electricity to the homes, right? I don't know how many of you have exposure to that domain. So let's say I'm working in a power generation or power distribution unit, right? Plant. Now I'm dealing with different sensors and different devices which produce power and distribute power to the grid, right? Now, operationally, so that's a classic engineering problem. It's not a software or different problem, right? I'm sitting in a plant. I'm a non-software guy. My job is to make sure that whatever power is produced is distributed and goes to the grid, right? So I have to prove that end to end. So classic engineering problem, right? So now for me to understand I need to make sure that everything is up and running. So the equipment is not faulty, it's all functioning 100%, right? So I need some solution like IoT, right? IoT devices, these IoT devices. So I need to collect data constantly into my platform. I need to monitor the faulty products. I need to be proactively able to maintain them, replace them, right? So that way my output to the grid does not fall back. So that's a classic example for a non-engineering or a non-software guy to solve, right? And this is already used in US and across many different if you for utilities. I just gave an example from energy utilities, but then you can extend that for healthcare. For example, right, you wear the wearable device and you have to put 10K walks to manage your diabetes. That's an example. It gives you back your sugar reading, and then you can adjust your diet and exercise. So that's an example of a non-engineering problem, right? And then based on that, the doctor has data, and then they can subscribe medicine or ask you to use insulin or come out of the insulin, right? So, I mean, I hope that addresses your question. But
No, it does. It
I can go
does.
day long, Vishal, but so many use
I know.
cases
I
and
know.
samples to talk about. But yeah, AI will make an impact for non-software, non-engineering kind of work.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anil. Beautiful insights. Really, it's always, I think this is the third session I'm covering this with you. And every time I think the response has been the same. Very fantastic, very, very attention to detail insights across. And of course, there are some lovable topics from your side. And I know that you can go day and night around the same. So thank you so much again, Anil. Let me just quickly go back and share my screen. Again, a small token for the appreciation from IPL and the Product Leaders Forum as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Really,
Vishal. I think it's
a
been a great learning for me, like, especially the B2B questions and how to use AI in the non-engineering kind of setup, right? So
yeah.
good
Thank
learning.
you, thank you,
Thoroughly enjoyed all
thank
three
you,
sessions.
thank you, Anil, and on behalf of the entire Product Leaders Forum and the Institute of, we'd like to present this small token of appreciation for sharing your time and expertise with us today. Thank you once again for giving such an amazing session. All right, to all the attendees. with that, I come to an end of today's session. And a big thank you to all the speakers who joined in the past, and as well as Anil for sharing their experience and insights, and even bigger thank you to each one of you for joining with us and making today's conversation engaging, really engaging. We hope you find today's discussions valuable and walked away with ideas you can apply in your own product journey.